What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here to discuss some potential free agent targets for the Detroit Lions. Today, we are diving into the defensive tackle position for the Lions and just taking a look in a part one at some of the potential targets for the Lions this offseason. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, I'm calling this a part one because there is definitely potential for a part two to this. At the same time, there's also potential for us to break down some of these guys individually as well. Of course, if we sign them, we'll do that. But there's also potential for that. My goal for this video is to not make it extremely long, even though that never happens. I mean, you would think it'd be one of those things where it's like, hey, I don't want to make this video an hour long, even though we do that over here, so it's not crazy. But I'm trying not to make this video an hour long. I'm trying to go to that format of, hey, I hit on some big time bullet points, we go to the next player, and boom, that's the video. We keep it short and sweet, like 20 minutes, and we're moving on. And then if we want to break down a guy individually, we can do that. But it probably won't happen that way. I plan to make it that way, but I don't know. With that being said, this video will not include the Isaiah Buggs or the Benito Jones because one, I did a video on them, and two, you guys know I want Benito Jones back as an exclusive rights free agent. Give him a shot. All right, it's a cheap contract. Why not? I would definitely bring him back. Then also Isaiah Buggs, I want to bring him back as well, but he's not going to be included on this list. Of course, that does impact how the Lions address free agency. If they brought back both of those guys, do they want to look in the free agency market for a defensive tackle? Do they not? You also have Levi Onwuzurike, who I thought was just really in the worst situation possible for the first season that we got to see him now 2 seasons ago. On top of that, he just had back surgery, so I know there's a lot of questions of, well, what is Levi, right? What's this going to be? Very hopeful for Levi. I really am not giving up on the guy because if you really think about it, if we were just taking a look at the defensive line as to what, if let's just say Levi panned out, let's just say he did, and I get it hasn't to this point, but our defensive line will be pretty darn stacked with young talent that's loaded. I mean, you're talking Aiden Hutchinson to Ali McNeil to Levi in this scenario next to James Houston. I mean, it would be loaded with depth and flexibility of the guys like Josh Paschal, right? That's not even talking about the Kaminsky's and the free agents. I mean, that's a loaded defensive line. But of course, the big question there has been Levi because of the back surgery, because of the rough start that he had with the Lions. But again, I thought that was like the worst situation possible. The way we were playing defensively, I didn't think it fit him that well at all. We knew that coming out, he was a guy that had to develop in some areas anyway. It just was not ideal for him. But with that being said, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the guy. So that can affect how the Lions do it. You could still go into this free agency or the draft and say, hey, we got to get better here, but we maybe don't want to completely go all the way in here and give out this massive deal with tons of guarantees and say, hey, Levi's actually balling. Now we don't have an out. So that's something that could impact how the Lions address this. If we do a part two, it's mainly just to take a look at some of the potential targets out there. I say potential because one, I don't know if the Lions are going to be interested. And two, at the same time, these guys could be re-signed. They could be brought back. And of course, we know they can sign elsewhere as well. However, every player on this list that I'm going to talk about today is an unrestricted free agent, meaning that they can be signed by anybody this offseason. But that does not mean that they cannot be re-signed. All right, so again, this is not like a specific list order, and it's also not just like here are my top 3, this is my favorite. It's more so just taking a look at some of the top targets out there, and then the part 2 to this could be taking a look at more targets that are also available. And I try to hit on some of the big ones in this video, and again, these guys can also have their own video as well, but just to give a nice little sense of some of the top guys out there in my opinion. With that being said, I'm trying to touch on some different levels here with some of these targets, so let's just dive right into it. We're going to talk some numbers as well in this video because we can't just get whoever we want to. I mean, if you're going to go sign a top free agent here, then you're going to have to adjust his contract. You may have to make some cuts. You probably aren't bringing back the Isaiah Buggs. And on top of that, you're probably not spending big money really anywhere else in free agency. The process will continue, short-term deals, building through the draft, but getting a veteran that's proven. Or maybe we get one of those surprise big-time deals to a guy that maybe he's a little bit younger, maybe he's just extremely productive, and it throws us off a little bit, but at the same time, it plugs a massive hole for the Lions, and it makes them a lead in the front. All of these things are possible. I got to start off with some of the top targets, I think, in this year's free agency market. One guy I've heard a lot of talk about within the Lions community. The other guy I've heard like no talk about. At least I haven't seen it. Maybe you guys have. And if I missed that, I apologize. But I think he's got to get some attention. I'm going to start right there. Because if we're going to go out and spend big time money, if you were going to go out and give out this big time contract, one guy that has to come up that I haven't heard is Javon Hargrave. Now, we're going to talk about Daron Payne. We definitely will. But Javon Hargrave has to be brought up from the Philadelphia Eagles because I just think it makes sense across the board for you can see the fit with Javon Hargrave and the Lions. Now, one of the biggest things here is that he is 30 years old. We have seen interior defensive linemen continue very good production throughout into their 30s, so it doesn't mean he's going to completely fall off. I definitely don't believe he's fallen off. Now, based on how I think he wins as a pass rusher specifically, there could be some decline there on the way. With that being said, though, we're talking about a guy that going back to 2020 has the third best pass rush win rate. Now, that goes back to his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, but third best pass rush win rate in the league, which puts him with the Aaron Donalds and the Chris Jones, even though Aaron Donald is... he's in his own atmosphere, okay? He's in his own lane with all of this. But it puts him in that category. So if you were asking me based on last season, who did I feel like was the best pass rushing defensive tackle? It's definitely Javon Hargrave, not Daron Payne. Now, I say that in saying that doesn't mean that you give the deal. It makes the most sense for you. That doesn't mean that he will be next season. But based on last season alone, he was the best pass rushing defensive tackle. Doesn't mean he was always the most clean, but he was the best to me that's on the free agent market. Not better than Donald, not better than Chris Jones specifically on the free agent market. Basically 6'2", 305. Again, the age is a big thing. I put his PFF grades, and then on the bottom you can see his projected annual salary according to Spot Track, and that's based on production and age and injuries and all of those things, and they have it at $20.1 million, which is insane. So probably going to give out a huge deal to a defensive tackle. This is the kind of guy that's in that market, and the concern here is that yeah, he is 30 years old, so maybe that deal looks like I'm not going above 3 years, or hey, I can give guarantees, but I need a way out in 2 years into this contract. So there's ways to set it up so you're not stuck with this. I mean, someone may say, hey, no, we're giving him 4 years, all of it's guaranteed, here's $80 million. Like, that may happen, and then you're like, okay, I'm not playing with that. But there are clearly ways to work around it where you can say, well, there's an out in this contract, or we're not going this long on the deal because of your age, and we do have some concerns with that. With that being said, though, first off, he has a trait that makes him elite as a pass rusher, and that is his get off. That is his quickness off the line, that is explosiveness into contact, and also somewhat of his ability to close the ground. Like, he is very elite off the line, and that sets up really his entire pass rush, but it's crazy from a guy at his size. Now, here's why I think the fit would make sense. Now, clearly, we're talking about a guy that's $20 million. All right, we're not talking about a guy that could be getting, hey, $4 million this next year, and it's like, this is a gem. No, you're paying for what you get, right, in that sense. Well, the fit makes sense to me because you have to pull it back to his time with the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2019 and before he was signed by the Philadelphia Eagles to a 3-year, $39 million deal, is that you're talking about a guy that I think played in a little bit of a different scheme defensively. Like when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers, it was a little bit more so reminded me of what the Lions did last year. They have been a little bit more aggressive in certain situations, but also based on the personnel that we had with the Isaiah Buggs and Elim McNeil going to the 3-tech, it made sense that the Lions were more of the attack and then react based off of that. And I think that's what the Lions are always going to want to be. And if you take back a look at what he did with Pittsburgh, I felt like it kind of fit more into that category than it did with Philadelphia, specifically against the run, in terms of playing a little bit more of that attack and react style. And if you look at his grades, he graded out way better than as a run defender. And I think that's why. Like, this is a stout, compact, built defensive tackle that honestly fits in similarly to an Isaiah Buggs in terms of their build, their arm length. Also, I don't know completely of Levi, but at the same time, what was great about Levi is we knew there was development, but he was strong for a guy that was 290 coming out. Meanwhile, this guy who's listed at 305, he has that elite get off, which is why he's going to get probably paid so much this offseason by somebody. So he fits into that, but I think the difference in what he was asked to do with Pittsburgh versus Philly, if you're concerned about his run defense, is a very big part of that. I mean, with Philly at the time, you had Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator. It was like, okay, this thing's probably going to open up, be more aggressive, get upfield, fill a gap, that kind of thing, and I think he showed ability to do that. Wasn't always super consistent. Also, as he kicked wider and wider to the tackle, I didn't love him against the run. But with Pittsburgh, it was a 2-eye, it was a 3-tech. He was more so known as their nose tackle. He honestly looked a little bit bigger to me then than he did with Philly, so maybe he lost some weight with Philly. That's very possible. But at the same time, he showed that versatility, meanwhile keeping crazy explosiveness, and he also showed some run scheme anticipation. He showed some awareness pre-snap to position himself and position his teammates. But what you love about him is the pass rush. I mean, we're putting him in the range of the Chris Jones and the Aaron Donalds and putting him number 3 with 18.8% pass rush win rate over those years. Would work, and he'd probably work with a lot of teams. What I like is he's a terrific athlete. He has that side swipe, forklift. Like, he knows how he wins as a pass rusher. Some guys, you look at him and like, I don't know if they know how they win. They're good athletes, but they just don't know, have a go-to. He does. Now, while I think he exposes his chest, what I also like is that he wins with a quick get off. It sets up everything. Great snap timing. And then on top of that, he goes into his side swipes, contact points right at the elbow, the wrist, side swipes. But also on top of that, he can forklift offensive linemen, get underneath, and then he continues to play very low throughout his entire rep. And I think naturally, again, that kind of fits into what the Lions had maybe last year of the compact build at that position. The difference is that he brings elite get off for a guy at that build, which is just seemingly rare. It just doesn't happen. I mean, a guy shouldn't be 305 and move like that, but also at the same time have some of that girth that the Lions are talking about in that compact build. Now, of course, again, I think he looked a little bit bigger with Pittsburgh, and I took a little bit away from it, but really not much at all. With that being said, though, again, arm length is a question. Usually I don't like to point that out, but there were times where you're like, oh, he looks like he's getting outreached here as a pass rusher, but it was like, oh, okay. His arm length is not elite. It's 32 inches, but again, that falls into the category of the Isaiah Buggs of this past season, right? He's a guy that if you had unlimited money, I would go after. I would, but you don't. So you have to take that into account, and you have to divide your money. But if you were looking at a guy that's a dog that I think could fit, he's that. He looked a little bit more stout and compact back with the Steelers. His lower base power popped up a little bit. Me has some question marks this past season with the Philadelphia Eagles. He does show very good upper body strength. Thought there was definitely question marks at his ability to square up and stay square into combination blocks. Again, I thought that looked better with Pittsburgh. He's a twitched up defender for his size, but I don't think he's very bendy, maybe not the most flexible, pass rusher. If you had unlimited money, would I be interested? I absolutely would. Will the Lions? I don't really think so. I'm going to be honest, I don't think so. I don't think they'll be in this market. But if they were going to say, hey, we're spending money here this offseason, this is the best pass rusher from this past year from defense tackle. That being said, that transition naturally has to go to Daron Payne, who is also a very good defensive player. There's some differences here. I don't think he's as clean with his tools, but I think there's also still room to grow. I mean, I think this is a guy that still has a lot there, and you're like, oh, this could get better from what I've seen. And at the same time, he's under 26 years old at this point. He will be, but he's 4 years younger basically because he's coming off the rookie deal with the Washington Commanders. 6'3", 320. You also get the PFF grades. He's another guy that's probably in the realm of he's going to get paid a ton of money this offseason. Just under 12% pass rush win rate, which is still very good. But he's not as productive, clearly, as Hargrave. But at the same time, he is also a guy that is younger, and you're excited about the tools that are still there. I'm talking about a guy that has a very strong base, does not get moved out, can play in the interior because of that base. Again, a lot of times you'll get guys that are 6'6", 6'7", and then you get naturally bad leverage, and that's not really the case here with Payne. And on top of that, he is a well-rounded. He's built well. Like, he had this coming out, and he came from Bama, and you get this with a lot of Bama defenders, whether that's the A'Shawn Robinsons, guys that do a little bit more stunt work, but at the same time, they're pretty much built like you would love, right? I mean, this is a guy that's just built like a rock all the way through his body, which is fantastic. He controls the block before he rushes, which fits into kind of the attack and react style of the Lions. They said they don't want to be that team that just closes their eyes and runs the field, and I don't think they'll ever be that. But also at the same time, I think personnel played into that a little bit as well. He continues to work through contact. I love this because as a pass rusher, this can make him effective. He doesn't have to get a step and then just run by, like, because that's not always his game. Instead, he continues to work through the reps. So when he gets the step, when he gets half of an offensive lineman, he continues to work through the rep to get back to the quarterback, and he's also able to break back, and I think, again, off a zone run, off a backside, and I think, again, it's a pad level that's very consistent, and on top of that, the balance that he plays with tied into all of that. He plays with very good balance. He doesn't fall on the ground. Like, I didn't see him fall on the ground. Now, when he's trying to make tackles, sometimes that's the case. In open field, it didn't always look very natural, but he doesn't get on the ground. He's always on his feet, and it's pretty awesome to see that, and at the same time, he's just rocked up. He's a very well-built defender, and his pad level is extremely consistent. Some of my knocks I had is that, he's not going to stress an offensive guard consistently off the line of scrimmage. It's good get off. It's good first step, but it's not in the realm of Javon Hargrave. He's an inconsistent finisher in terms of closing, ability to lock out as a defensive lineman, meaning create that separation, separate, and then finish as a defender. Inaccurate hands at times, which leads to, sometimes his walk back as a pass rusher, that bull rush and then walk back is just not there, beating the second blocker. I don't think it's the most polished, and I don't think, it's as clean as the tools still are there. I still think there's room for growth within his game just in terms of consistency, because you see a guy that can play in a lot of different run defenses, what you ask him to do, handle double teams. Here you get good get off. What you're going to see is going to get up on the pads of the offensive lineman, really not reset his weight. And then you can see the kind of knockback that he initially gets, but he doesn't position himself by sitting back down, twisting to allow him to handle and absorb that kind of down block. And I think sometimes he's not even aware of that down block being there. And then at the same time, it's just like he doesn't plan for that ahead of time. Versus a play like this was Hargrave's final year with Pittsburgh, and here they're going to go to a duo block, and you almost see some of the recognition of the split between the guard and the center there, maybe anticipating this. I mean, yeah, he could fit in your defense, but again, you're talking about a guy that is going to get paid in that Hargrave type of level. I'm not sure if the Lions would be in this world for any defensive lineman, I mean, unless it was Aaron Donald. Put him on here as well. I know a lot of you guys are fans of Daron Payne. Spent a ton of time with these guys, again, that's the goal. Delvin Tomlinson, though, I have to bring him up here because I think he's another guy that's probably in a lot of people's top list for interior defensive lineman, just based on what I saw. I mean, he's almost 29 years old again, so he's more in that Hargrave, kind of realm. And he also has a much bigger build than a Hargrave, right? I mean, this is a guy that's 6'3", 325, and I think the biggest difference here, and it honestly shows up with him comparing him to Payne as well, is that while Payne is a very great balance, very consistent pad level, Delvin Tomlinson looks 325. He looks big. He looks like a guy that's like, oh, okay. Like this to me, another unrestricted free agent here is probably more so of that nose tackle, better closer to the center, I would say. But he looks big. Like he looks like a dude that's like, okay, I'm not surprised that dude's 325. I mean, you want to kick him inside on pass downs. If he's going to be on the field, you got to kick him inside. You're not going to want him to work against the guard and say, hey, can he beat that guard one-on-one? That's not his game, right? That's not his game. So if you're going to have him out there on pass downs, and you probably would like to because of what he's probably going to get paid, you're going to want to kick him closer to the center. Now, Spot Track is considering more so closer to that 8.5 mil. Again, a lot of that is that he's not the explosive guy that puts the guard on his, toes, and then he can't even get to his pass set, and all of a sudden he's got this guy in his lap. He's not that. With that, what I like about Delvin Tomlinson is I kind of feel like I know what I'm going to get. Obviously, some of that plays into experience. Force him to really polish up and craft and be very good at his craft in other ways so that he can continue to win. By the way, notably, he was 310 coming out, so he has bulked up a little bit, meaning I think he might be able to drop some pounds and look a little bit twitchier than he looked. With that being said, though, he controls blocks with a pass rusher as a pass rusher with his heavy hands. He gets his hands on you, and he just controls. One move that he loves, and I noted that there in parentheses, is the push-pull. I mean, he brought this out over and over against the Lions. Is get up on the pads, push, pull, like that was his game, and it's his heavy hands, it's heavy initial bunch that he can utilize where you see that. And now against the Lions, I tried not to put too much into that because he was seeing he was seeing the Dan Skippers. Likes to utilize that, the push, pull. He has some knockback in his hands. He also has walk back power, which is going to force you to anchor. At that point, that's where you get some of the counters off of that head he has shown that he can utilize as well, and he can force you to get into that anchor. Also, his leverage is, again, pretty naturally good here at 6'3", and it doesn't rise. I mean, he plays pretty low for the most part, and he's very technically sound, I would say, in his hand usage, and he's pretty active throughout the rep. Now, I probably have to give him the most credit here out of any of the guys that I'm going to talk about in this video, because his ability to get to the second blocker and then be efficient and effective into a second blocker, I think he probably does better than everybody else, because I think it goes right to his skill set, which he doesn't rely on speed and quickness, so that doesn't slow, and that's not the issue for him. And at the same time, his pad level really never rises. He leans on the heavy hands and the hand usage and everything based off of that. So it allows him to kind of just work through multiple blockers where he can go center, guard, and just keep working back to the quarterback, keep driving back, keep walking back. And again, he's another guy with the stout build. And on top of that, he has good length, which is a little bit different from a Javon Hargrave, is that he has very good length and that he can hold his ground. Like, while there was questions with Philly, I think some of the schematic change, this is a guy that legitimately just showed that he can hold his ground. I mean, he can do that. And he was a guy that stack shed, almost like Isaiah Buggs, just at a higher level. But at the same time, that's kind of natural because he's 325, so you would anticipate that that's that if you're going to go pay him. And it was just like when you watched him against the Lions, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's kind of giving us problems there. I mean, he had 10 total tackles against us in one of our games. He's just different. He doesn't have the same type of shake or the same type of quickness. He fits into the mold of what you would anticipate given his size and the build that he plays at. He doesn't have that shake, that quickness. Sometimes you will lack the inability to finish when he gets half a lineman, that closing ability. He's on the ground way too often. Tomlinson, he's like the complete opposite here of Daron Payne, which is one reason I love Daron Payne. This guy's balanced. He's on the ground a lot, unfortunately. He's on the ground a lot. And at the same time, you know, the foot agility. You get him caught going like this, leaning over his toes, and that's where, again, where you get him to fall and things like that. So, to me, is Delvin Tomlinson what the Lions are looking for? I'm not sure. I think he's more of a nose tackle, which at that point, I don't think that's what the Lions look for. To me personally, I think they're looking for more of the 3-tech, more of the explosive pass rusher that can also be able to attack and react. I know it's like, hey, I'm asking for everything in the dude. You want him to be this, you want him to be that, you want him to be that. I get it, I know, okay? But in an ideal world, I think that's what the Lions would look for. And that's why I like Isaiah Buggs, because I'm like, I know what he's good at. He's not an elite pass rusher. He doesn't have elite quickness, but he can hold his own, and he can get some pressure because he can win immediately with his hands. So while Delvin Tomlinson is great, and he may take some of the things to another level of Isaiah Buggs, at the same time, he's not that guy that is like, this guy's scary because of how fast he gets off. If he's going to be out there pass down, you got to put him over the center. Now, Isaiah Buggs isn't out there on pass down, so that's just part of it. But at the same time, is the trade-off worth paying for that? I don't know, and I don't think the Lions necessarily will be in this market as much, but definitely someone to bring out because Delvin Tomlinson is good at what he's good at, and I like him for that. Okay, that was weird. Now, another guy. I'm trying to hit some different areas with this. This is why part 2 is very possible. Let's continue to try to stay in this range. Different player, but let's stay in this range. Another guy that I really like. And now this one could fall into a number that's like, oh, okay, this makes more sense. So we're talking about Hargrave, and we're talking about like $20 million a year. Well, we're talking about David Onyemata. Now, this time, you're talking about a guy that's in a similar age range, 30 years old. Okay, so you're like, I don't love that. But the price range is probably going to drop in half at least. Probably going to cut right in half. So now all of a sudden, you're like, okay, this is possible. I want to point a couple things out really quickly before we continue. First off, David Onyemata, he was suspended for the first 6 games last year for substance abuse. Also, you have Delvin Tomlinson, who missed, I believe it was weeks 9 through 13. He missed like 4 games this past season with an injury, so I want to point that out as well. This David guy, though, he's intriguing because he was a guy that came out of the draft and he was very raw, and it was just based on this guy's a crazy awesome athlete, and it was what can we develop him into. With that being said, as I'm going to talk about, I don't really necessarily see him as this is the star of the show, but if he's a supplementary piece, he could be an absolute problem. With that, let's get back to the video. This is legitimately possible. 6'4", 300 pounds. This is a possible signing. What kind of was my big feeling through the year as I watched Daron Payne is I thought he literally got better as the year went on, and I was like, oh, okay, he grew on me. Like, Payne grew on me is something that I noticed with him, and I think Onyemata just grew on me the entire idea of it. Like, Payne grew on me as I watched him through the season. This guy, the idea of it started to kind of grow on me as a potential legitimate option for the Detroit Lions, and why is that? Well, first off, Pro Football Focus projecting like 2 years, $15 million. Of course, I like the price point there. I also like the idea of potentially giving out a shorter term deal. Reason being is because I don't want to completely give up on Levi, and I think if the potential of Levi stepping up, I don't want it to be in a situation where it's like, hey, I went out and I gave Daron Payne 3 years or 4 years, $80 million. It's like that was my big time spending, because at that point, I basically, to me, just kind of saying, hey, Levi's not the guy, because what that's going to do for Levi, unless you have a very legitimate out, is you're going to make Levi's like, look, he's just going to be a backup, and then when his rookie contract ends, he's probably not coming back because you just invested this in Levi. It's just probably not going to stick around. With that, David Onyemata could give you the flexibility to keep Levi around and say, hey, now, the 2-year deal, that doesn't line up great because Levi's only got 2 years left on his deal. So, if like, okay, 2 years, he's going to be a free agent. I get it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But the point is that with a shorter-term deal like this, if you can leave yourself some flexibility with a year and then you're out, or maybe it's not a 2-year deal, maybe you get a 1-year deal or something like that. I don't know if you'll be able to pull that off. But a little bit like a deal like this could give me a little bit more versatility where I still think you're allowing the door to be open on Levi, but at the same time, you're also getting a guy that you're looking at and saying, hey, it's going to help us and we improve at this position, but also on top of that, because of his age and his experience, like, you know that he's gonna help you, he's gonna get some pressure, but also on top of that, you're also not dialing and locking yourself into this massive contract that you have to just deal with for years. At the same time, you're giving yourself some flexibility and you're giving yourself an improvement. Then it's about finding how much money is worth that improvement, and can I do that in the draft, right? So there's always the balancing act. This is why I want to give you guys some different names to think about. So let's talk about David Onyemata here for a second, okay? What do I like? What do I not like about this guy? I feel like, again, he fits a little bit more into that attack and react sort of style, which is great. I like that with David. On top of that, he's a twitched up athlete. Like, again, for a dude at his build, you don't always expect a guy that's going to be that twitched up. He is that. He's a guy that quickly gets into that sprinter stance, which is one of the similarities that I found between him and when Levi came out of Washington. I like is that Levi quickly would get here and it's like, oh snap, I got to deal with this. You're like, oh, you knew quick, I got to deal with this guy. David Onyemata gives me some of that. Now he's 30 years old, which again, the short-term deal, I'm cool for that because again, I don't have to worry as much about, I'm stuck with a guy that's 30 years old and he starts to fall off a cliff. For offensive lineman specifically, is that he gets you into a position where you're going to struggle as a guard to get into that second step in your kick slide. You're going to struggle because he's going to be in your lap now. And that's because he gets to that sprinter stance and he's there. This is the reason deadly stunt creator. And the reason being, and I think you could knock it for this saying, oh, a lot of his production comes from stunts. And that's fair. I mean, David Onyemata is a guy that does have, we're talking about like an 11.9 pass rush win rate over the last 3 seasons, which is incredible. And yeah, I get it. His grade and stuff dipped this past year, but I'm just watching last year and I like the guy. 3 years now, he's had great pass rush production, and I think he is a really good stunt creator, and we saw how much the Lions utilize stunts, and the reason for that is he has that crazy explosiveness, which allows him to open up stunts because you're not going to allow an offensive guard to really get set into his normal kick slide, so you're forcing him to react much quicker, which all of a sudden can get you to them to lose being square, open, and now all of a sudden the stunt becomes deadly off of it because you opened up because you had to deal with this guy so quickly. He's got fast hands, very fast hands. Like when he sees where he wants to play some, boom, I'm here, and I love that. And he shoots into blocks. Like he will literally jump into blocks, and he also has a lateral flow ability across the line of scrimmage and lateral ability to cover a lot of depth, which again pulls right back into what I said as a stunt ability, is that he can cover a lot of ground moving laterally, which is awesome. So it's not just directly upfield, it's also the lateral movement skills. One of my questions that I kind of got in my head here is, okay, I love him as a stunt guy. Can he consistently win one-on-one? If I match you up with the guard, will I say he knows how he's going to win? I don't think it's on that level. With that being said, though, that's why the price point is what it is. That's why I'm a little bit more willing to take this risk if it is 2 years, $15 million. I'm like, okay, I could see doing that. And that's why he becomes one of the guys where I'm saying, what's a realistic possibility? This guy pulls into the way of he's realistic. Obviously, the connections, and he can stay square to the line of scrimmage. Okay, now, again, you can see I noted there, inconsistent hand swipes, inconsistent one-on-one wins, right? He is a little bit hit and miss, a little bit inaccurate with his swipes there, getting that contact, where Hargrave is just like, oh, okay, he's money with that. His pad level pops up occasionally where sometimes he'll get him offline. He just stands straight up. It's like, that's not very beneficial, and that hurts him a lot because he plays, again, like Hargrave, a lot through that game. And again, 6'4", he's a little bit on the taller side, so he really needs to keep his pad level down. Occasionally he'll pop straight up, shows up against run and the pass. And on top of that is he'll get caught overextending. So let's talk about the run, right? Can he hold ground? Can he be an attack and react guy? And while I think it's a little bit more hit and miss here with him, what I do see is that a big problem of that comes from the fact that he's caught overextending. He'll reach and jump into the block with his base nowhere near being under him, and then he's going like this, and he's got his feet apart, and he's trying to hold on, and it's like all of a sudden here comes a down block or a tackle crashes into his side, and it's like he's completely out of the play. So that's where I see some inconsistencies, which leads questions to combos, and I think just his positioning in general. His weird positioning to handle combo blocks shows up a lot, so that's something that's going to have to be cleaned up, but at the same time, you're like, you just kind of know that can come with the territory. Now, he flashes good, a rep against Washington. I was like, oh, that looks good. Like, he's aware of it. He positions himself well, right? He can kind of twist, and then he can hold his ground. But you just get an inconsistent guy in that sense. Also, ability to, again, lock out and finish consistently is a knock. Lower body base strength isn't something that he's going to just, push you back as an offensive lineman. It's not that great. However, he does, again, flash reps. The Rams was one. Kansas City, like, he'll flash it. It's in there. It's in this toolbox, but it's not something that's going to be consistently dominant. So while you understand the price points here, you're taking the hits with the misses. What I like is that you're getting a guy that's proven pass rush production, stunt man, and at the same time, while I'm getting some hit and miss with the run defense, which is probably my biggest knock with him, at the same time, if you can, and you believe you can clean some of that up, I do like it. Now, he's probably directly going to replace an Isaiah Buggs. I think if you do this, you're probably getting rid of Isaiah Buggs. Now, if you can keep him on a cheap deal, I'm here for it. If you could have Buggs, David Onyemata, and Levi, and then maybe even a draft pick, okay, that's awesome. It's a lot of guys, but it's pretty awesome because I know Isaiah Buggs has the flexibility to kick in and be my nose tackle, and Lee McNeil then becomes my nose tackle tackle, and I think that's great, is the price point to that. And while I have some questions, that comes with the territory. Now, with this, I want to start to wrap this thing up. Let me throw you guys into kind of a, hey, buckle your seatbelt type of moment, okay? I'm not going to spend too much time here because I think a big reason I'm not going to spend too much time is because, first off, the clear fact of this, Lions literally could have claimed this guy last season. Now, did they feel like they didn't need to? Possibly. Or was it more so, hey, this doesn't make sense? That's also very possible. So the Lions could have claimed this guy last year, so I don't want to spend too much time because I think it's a very big time shot in the dark, but I'm going to throw him out there because I think he's intriguing. You're talking about a former very high pick, first round pick that had his 5th year declined and things were just not going well with the Chargers. I think Staley says the first time this kind of thing happened, and you could tell he was not happy, so they ended up cutting him during the season. A former first round pick was cut on his rookie deal. It's not ideal. Then he gets picked up by the Chargers. Weirdly enough, 2 weeks in, he plays the team that cut him, and he gets picked up by the Raiders, I should say, not the Chargers, because the Chargers cut him. He gets picked up by the Raiders, and there was some here. Now, I try to focus on his time with the Raiders. I looked a little bit back with the Chargers, and here's some of the notes that I took with this guy. First off, of course, he's still young, 26. He's a former first-round pick. Now, Spotrac is projecting closer to $8 million a year. If it's that high, I think this is a big-time struggle, and I already have questions if the Lions would be interested anyways. I don't think the Lions would put that kind of money on this kind of guy, because, again, they probably could have claimed him last year to see what it would have looked like. What I like is he's got fast hands, quick reactions with his hands. He's got good lateral first step. He, again, is one of those guys that just brings some of that, boom, explosive first step. He just has that. With that said, is that it's nowhere near being consistent enough because his snap timing is way hit and miss. Very hit and miss his snap timing. Going back to college, this was a knock, and it still continues to be a knock to this point. He utilizes kind of that punch and then rip over the center. I think a big thing with him is that when you watch him, he doesn't bring you as much of that knockback and push back into the pocket and some of the power. So because of that, he becomes a guy that doesn't really win outside the tackles, right? Win as an edge. So he plays between the tackles, which is great. But what that means, he has to be very clean with his technique, like Hargrave, but in a different way. He has to be very clean because he has to be very clean with his hand usage. He has to be very clean with his side, with his swipes. He needs to be more clean with his spins, which is great. You see all the natural athleticism, but for him, it's going to be important because it's such a condensed area where when you're trying to beat a guard or a center and you're playing on the interior, it's a small area to win. And for him, I think his athleticism is like, oh, okay, this should be better on the outside. He needs more room to work, but he's not going to beat your tackle very often on the outside. So now he needs to be extremely clean, and just right now he's not that. So there's still growth that needs to be here. I just think he's an interesting idea. So I thought I would throw him out there. You could see some of my knocks losing connection with his hands against the run. Not the most technically sound as a pass rusher. Sitting in his base to hold ground is not great. Look, I don't think the Lions will be on this board, but I wanted to give you all a variety. And finally, not going to spend much time here at all. I didn't watch tons of him, but I did watch a few games, 3-4 games of him. Calais Campbell. This one is not technically a free agent. So I gave you 5. This one's not technically a free agent. I get it, at least now. Maybe something changed. I don't know. I could have missed it. Calais Campbell is on the books for about $9.5 million next season. I know I'm reaching. Just hang with me. $9.5 million is his cap hit. They saved Baltimore, if cutting him, $7 million. Okay, now that may be or may not be something they want to do, but Lamar could be getting a big deal, and if they want to do that, they may need to say, hey, we need to open up some cap space. So Calais Campbell, who said he's not retiring. It sounds like he's probably going to give it another year. He's 36 and a half years old. He's old, all right? We're not talking about a guy here that's like, hey, we're going to get a lot of year. You're not. You're getting a 1-year type of deal. And we talked about this happening in the past with the Rams. It's happened when Brad Holmes was there. You give out those 1-year type of deals. They come in and they help you, and it's like, hey, we're going for it. By the way, the Lions have the 9th best odds to win the Super Bowl this year. It's better than the Packers. We're 9th in the NFL. Was that real? I said that. 4th best odds to win the NFC. What? Look, the point is, I love it. With that being said, those kind of things can get to Calais Campbell, who says, hey, man, I really want to play in Super Bowl 58. Okay, look, now you're all like, hey, he's reaching. I'm not. First off, I think the Lions go into Super Bowl next year. And 2, at the same time, Calais Campbell sees those odds like they're a legitimate contender. That's why winning 9-8 was so important. That's why everybody who was watching that game was so important, because a thing like this becomes possible. It's why when the Rams went 10-7 and they won a playoff game, I believe, a little bit different than us, but we went 8-2 to finish the season, and everybody sees that and they're like, oh, this is a quick turnaround by Sean McVay. Now all of a sudden you get the 1-year deals where you're like, I'm coming here because I want to win. And then they all of a sudden catapult to being 13-3. That's why things like this are possible. I'm not locked into the books very long term here. It's a 1-year deal. I could throw a void here, whatever. He may even take a discount. Point is, it's a complete reach, but he's still a good player. Still very productive. He's 6'8", 307. He's a complete outlier. He's been an outlier ever since been in the league, right, with Miami. He's an outlier. But He knows how he wins because of experience. He's very creative. He's crafty. He's like that crafty vet when you watch him. You know, I watch him and like, okay, right before snap, I'm changing. Now everybody's assignment changed. I'm moving. He's crafty. He's like a crafty cornerback in a sense. He's got creative hand usage because he has to win over top. A lot of times it's the overhand swim move, get my hand on the back shoulder, push over. But a lot of it, he's creative with his hands, active with his hands, and he draws a lot of double teams from what I saw. Now, naturally, his pad level is extremely high. I have some questions about his ability to sit in there, squat, and handle the run. But at the same time, he's been a guy that's very productive. Feels like a flash player, and I hate saying that, but at the same time, he's going to give you negative plays, and he can get after the passer. His pass rush will also stall out. He's got very high pad level. He's not the elite first step kind of guy. And look, one thing I liked about Payne, I'll give him some love here, and I don't know if I brought it up, is I liked he had a natural feel for getting into passing lanes. Okay, this dude has almost 36-inch arms. I mean, that comes with it. 36-inch arms. He's like 6'8". If he was just out there on pass downs over your center and he couldn't get there, but he just stuck his arms up, like, try throwing over that. I mean, I have to bring that up. I have to. But I'm going to throw him in here as just an idea. I don't know if this would happen, but I'm just throwing it in there because he's a guy that could fall in that realm, and then maybe all of a sudden we get that rumor one day, and it's like, hey, the Lions could be interested in Calais Campbell. He gets cut, and you're like, uh-oh, he said that. He said that. DoseOfDion 2.0 said that. He said keep an eye on this guy. So I'm doing it. I'm giving you a name. Just keep an eye on him, all right? Just do it. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. Point is, those are 5 free agents plus an honorable mention, I guess. Just different categories. These are not my top 5. A part 2 is possible to this list. We can go through more guys. We'll probably not have the same big names, but I wanted to address those. If you guys want a specific video, which I'm still kind of planning to do on a Daron Payne because he gets a lot of attention, I think he probably deserves his own specific video. Maybe a Javon Hargrave. I can do that. But if you guys want a part 2, let me know in the comments below. We can do other positional groups. I thought this was a good way to hit it. It took me way too long to do this video. I know I probably talked and gave way too many notes on specific guys. I apologize. And this video probably will end up being way too darn long. But with that, I thought it was a good video. Mock off season coming soon with Red. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.